The secret to dominating in Battlefield isn't settings, it's strategy. And there's 3 key strategies that I brought over from my 10-year R6 career to make Battlefield 6 easy. Once you apply these strategies to your game, you'll find yourself at the top of the scoreboard game after game. Those 3 strategies are pressure, space, and team play, which are the deadliest tools in any first-person shooter. And I realize this can kind of sound boring, but you won't think it's boring when you're getting tons of kills every single game, okay? So let's break down the first secret strategy, pressure. If you've watched my R6 videos, you'd know all about pressure already. Pressure is the tool that creates winning plays. In R6, it looks a lot different, but it achieves the same result. You break down barricades, open up walls, and use your utility to cause distractions, disorient enemies, and big picture gain the advantage. For example, instead of walking straight into the bomb site, you first want to open up other avenues and clear out the traps and information. Then once you do go for that play, they're now looking the wrong way and you're shooting them in the back. By layering your gameplay with pressure, those winning plays are more effective with less effort. The result? Bigger opportunities for both you and your teammates. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve in Battlefield. There are way more people in the lobby here, meaning your teammates matter a whole lot more because you can only achieve so much as one person. The easiest way to make your teammates more effective is to create as much pressure as possible. This pressure will distract the enemies, force them to deal with you, and allow your team to succeed easier because of your massive pressure-filled distraction. So, how do you do it? Well, there's many different methods to creating pressure, and we'll discuss a few of them, but the most important thing to take away from this entire video if you want to win is this. Create as much pressure as you can as frequently as possible. My personal favorite way to do this is by capturing points. Always be capping is the motto here. If you're constantly jumping on points, especially the ones that aren't typically being defended, you're forcing the other team to react and deal with you or risk losing that point. Squads start to spawn on it or start bringing vehicles over to deal with you. Your massive pressure point has now forced the other team to invest their resources in just 1 out of 32 guys on your team. Sometimes you need to mentally check yourself in order to do this. Are you constantly feeding into the massive team fight and achieving nothing push after push? Find a new route around that section and get deep. Start capturing a point that hasn't been contested in a while. This stirs up the pot and adds that pressure. That massive team fight, it's actually helping it more now because half of their team that also felt kind of useless fighting in it are now going to defend the point that you are capturing by yourself. Resources are lost on the main objective and your team has the opportunity to capture it now. At the same time, you're farming the flock of soldiers that are running towards you, blowing your score up as you capture points and get capture kills which are worth a ton. And while the ABCs of Battlefield, always be cappin', is the #1 motto to go by, it's only as effective as your abilities as a player. If you can't win a one-on-one gunfight, it's not going to be as strong, which is why working on your aim and positioning is also important. It's something we can go into detail on in another video, but even then, still go for these solo caps. You may just get a free flag, or at the very least, waste the enemy's time, which is still creating pressure. If you're really struggling, use vehicles. Not only can you get to those points way quicker, but if you're in a tank, you can capture it much easier too. Tanks are tools that provide a massive amount of pressure and safety. When teams don't run enough engineers and ignore the tanks, they get mopped if the tanks actually push up. Far too many times I just see tanks sitting in the back of the team's HQ doing absolutely nothing. Sitting in the back of your spawn means you have no space on the map and you're creating no pressure because of it. Pressure converts to wins, and sitting in the back of the spawn is how you hand over that pressure to the other team while simultaneously screwing over yours. When used effectively though, tanks are extremely strong, which is exactly why you have to destroy them. When a tank is being used properly, you need to take out the tank or you will lose just because of how much pressure they create. They take space, control that space, and anyone who enters that space gets clapped. Turning a corner and getting absolutely blasted by a tank is the one thing in this game that makes me rage every single time. They're extremely strong because, well, they're tanks. They're literally tanks, which is the exact reason why you need to destroy them as soon as possible. And if you have a more passive playstyle, pressure is still possible. It turns out there's actually a right and a wrong way to play recon. In R6, a passive anchor can still create pressure by shooting towards the enemies or using utility. In Battlefield, a passive sniper can create pressure by positioning themselves in the right spots. Some recons sit in the back of spawn or on top of the mountain on Operation Firestorm and do absolutely nothing. The enemies don't really care that you're there because you're missing 98% of the shots you fire and you're finishing the game with 2 kills. Your distraction is not big enough to create pressure. But if you get on top of buildings directly above key objectives or slightly behind the enemy's push, you've suddenly become the most annoying person in the lobby and created a devastating amount of pressure. Now the other team has to find a way to get rid of you or risk you taking out a ton of their pushing force as they enter the objective. The hardest part about this is just not getting sniped from other areas and actually staying alive. But even a short window of pressure from a spot like this can be enough to create the gap for your team. The issue with pressure is that you can't really create it without having space on the map, which is why making space and taking space is the next strategy that I brought over from R6. Making space in R6 is a severely underrated strategy. Most people don't even have it at the forefront of their gameplay because it doesn't show up on the scoreboard, but it's truthfully one of the biggest factors when it comes to winning. The more space you own on a map, the more freedom your teammates have to move around. If you control 99% of the space, the other team is stuck with only 1%. It is nearly impossible to win an R6 round by pushing a single doorway, unless the other team pushes past it into you and completely throws the round, which, now that I think about it, that actually happens all the time in Siege, because people are very impatient, it turns out. And if that's you, well, try out Battlefield. I mean, it's really the perfect game to never be bored. When you're playing Conquest, the concept of space control is even more straightforward than in Siege. The more space you have and the more buildings your team is in, the easier it is to capture and defend objectives. Instead of trying to force your way onto objectives, you take the space around that objective and take out the enemies from behind first. Space creates the flanks and crossfires and makes everything 10 times easier because instead of head-on gunfights, you're shooting everyone in the back. In a mode like Rush, creating space is the #1 priority in order to plant the bombs. And like R6, utility is the best tool for creating that space. Sure, you could sneak in and get the bomb planted, but once you die, they're just going to defuse it right away because they still have control of that space. That's why you want to actually dominate the space first before planting. Using smoke grenades to block off those long lines of sight lets you get across clearings into more ideal positions. These positions give you advantages by having more cover and stopping the enemies from pushing up and taking that space back. Then you can repeat the process again to gather even more space. Space is dominance. If you can't move, you can't win. And if you don't move, you won't win. So you have to create it. Both teams are simultaneously fighting for control of the space, whether they realize it or not. The sooner you understand that and start acting on it in your games, the sooner you'll start dominating. And even once you make it to the objective, you still want more space. Instead of sitting on the site and hoping you don't get folded by the next wave of enemies that comes in throwing grenades and hitting flanks, stop that wave before it even gets there. Pushing past the site and starting your engagements from the deepest possible position is how you do that. From here, you can just shoot them in the back as they barrel towards the objective. Every kill you get is pressure taken away from the site. And once you finally die, you've just lost that deep space, which is actually completely fine because now you can respawn at the objective and essentially get an extra life in before they get there. Space isn't just two-dimensional though. Height is also a major advantage. Taking high ground is always a smart option as it provides you with more cover and allows you to select which gunfights you want to take. This is also why specifically targeting enemies with the high ground is very impactful for your team as it clears the path for them to continue forward and make space without being caught off by players in these power positions. Like our recon example from earlier, taking that space above key objectives is what allows you to create that massive pressure. The two strategies are intertwined, and the more you can combine them, the more you'll dominate. Speaking of pressure, tanks. We gotta bring them back because not only are they the #1 tool for creating pressure, but they're also the #1 tool for creating space. Need to get into a contested position? Drive in there with a tank and go to town. Need to hold control of an area? Pull up a tank and start raining fire. By gaining the space, you gain positional advantages and good spawn points for your squad. The less time it takes to get somewhere and the safer it is to get there, the easier everything becomes. If you control all the space to the point where the other team can't get out of their HQ without getting smoked, you will win. Here's an example of a match where all of our tanks just sat in our HQ doing nothing. Guess what? We got plowed because their team's tanks drove into each point with no contention, we had no tanks to level the playing field, and they ran us down. They had the space, and we got wiped because of it. From the other team's point of view, they just ran through every point with their tanks, while for some reason we sat our tanks in the back of our HQ and baited for kills. Yeah, I'm sure we got a couple kills doing this, but we also sealed our fate of getting bent over and railed in front of the 32-man audience called the other team. By taking space, you are controlling the freedom of the match. Your team wants the freedom to run through the map effortlessly and take objectives while stopping the other team from having that same freedom. The more space you control as a team, the less freedom the other team has. More pressure creates more space, and more space opens opportunities for more pressure. It's a feedback loop that keeps you winning. The final piece of the puzzle, though, is sprinkling in that team play. We've already figured out that space and pressure is one way to open opportunities for your team, and many times a solo flank or capture is enough to do it. But to level up every single play and make them unstoppable, you just need a little help from your team. Ironically, this doesn't mean you need good teammates. It just means you need to know how to use the bad ones. Good teammates are a best case scenario, but you can't control how good or bad the teammates you get are, which is why you need to implement some strategy to make the best with what you got. That starts with understanding one simple formula. More bodies equals a bigger advantage equals better odds of winning a team fight. For example, a 10 versus 1 fight is nearly impossible to lose, even with 10 garbage players. In R6, this means using your teammates as bait in a 2v1. Peeking right after him makes it way more likely you'll win the round because your opponent can't aim at both of you at the same time. It's following your bad teammates around the map and using them as human drones to effectively take space and trade them out to level the playing field. In Battlefield, instead of a 2v2, you might have a 10v10 or a 30 versus 30. So how do you keep the man advantage on a much larger scale? Trading a single guy out in this scenario won't be as effective as R6 because of the massive man count. However, Battlefield has one mechanic that R6 doesn't have that makes it so much easier to win these team fights. That mechanic is the down and revive system. In R6, you can finish a downed operator right away, or it's a headshot and they just get insta-clapped. But in Battlefield, everyone goes down, no matter what, and you can't finish them as the opponent. As a medic, you can juice these bad boys up almost instantly with the defibrillators, essentially doubling your manpower if you revive everyone. A 30v30 has now become a 60v30 if everyone just gets revived once. You can even revive the same person multiple times if they don't instantly get clapped off the first one. This is why I think medic is the most overpowered class in the game. We understand that engineers are a necessity because of how strong tanks are, but medics are a superpower. There's way more to medics than just revives though, but I'm going to save that for another video because I could glaze medics for at least 20 minutes straight. The point I'm trying to make is that revives give you this man advantage. It's why I rage at medics that walk past my body, and the same reason I'll run into the middle of the open to save just one guy, because even if I die, I get a revive off and the playing field is still at the same man count it was before. Plus, most of the time I can just get away with it without dying, making it a massive benefit to my team. But here's the hard truth of being a medic. All those defibs don't mean shit if they got a tank. So sometimes you gotta hop off the medic and grab a rocket launcher or two. The more engineers you have, the quicker you can tear down these vehicles. And this is the next element of team play, playing what's needed. In R6, sometimes you just gotta hop on the hard breach. In Battlefield, sometimes you just gotta hop on the engineer. The more engineers you have, the quicker you can heal up your vehicles and destroy the enemies. Nothing is more annoying than trying to take out a tank by yourself while two engineers juice it up from behind while the tank blasts you non-stop. Every rocket feels like it's doing absolutely nothing, especially when your tanks are sitting in the back of your headquarters being useless, and your recon players are sitting 40 miles out of bounds with 2 kills, and they can't even take out the engineers at the back of the tank. At this point, a rage has built up inside me as I get folded life after life. It burns so deep that I kind of start to mean it when I say I'm uninstalling this game and I'm never playing it again. Yeah, anyway, so that's when the best strategy is no longer trying to destroy that tank, but just to ignore it altogether. Nothing left to do now but get into the back lines and create some pressure. Because when in doubt, boys, always be capping. Know your ABCs. Either always be killing or always be capping. Now subscribe for more Battlefield 6 because I've actually been loving this game and I have a lot more tips to share.